Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this press conference. I'm Ismail Ajeng, the director of IERD, and I'm pleased to be joined today by our chairs, our Director General, and Ambassador Molokome. Each one of them will have a very short statement, and then we will be happy to take your questions. So without further ado, I'll hand over to the chair, Ambassador Molokome. Over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. Let me start by saying this has been historic first in the WTO that has brought together at Geneva headquarters 100 senior government officials and nearly 1,000 delegates. The senior officials meeting, or SOM, has provided an opportunity for capital-based officials to take decisions, take note of the progress of work in Geneva, provide political guidance and support, and endorse pathways for discussion in the run-up to MC13. Let's recall that the SOM has been the fourth station in the roadmap to the ministerial conference to be held in Abu Dhabi in late February 2024. So the time is short, and we still have a lot of work ahead of us. 2 additional important stations will take place in the coming weeks. The General Council meeting, that will take place next week on the 1st and 2nd of November, and at the end of the year meetings of the General Council and the Trade Negotiating Committee. We hope that by that time, we can flesh out the matters that have been endorsed by senior officials and on which political guidance has been received. Deliberations over the past 2 days have illustrated the urgent need for capital engagement at all levels to ensure success at MC13 and beyond. I believe all members are fully aware of what is at stake. Going back to capital, it will be important for senior officials to remain engaged, keep in touch with counterparts, and continue to provide impetus to ongoing processes in Geneva. This will help crystallize the outcomes and matters to be put forward by 2 ministers at MC13. It is the time I did appeal to the meeting or to the senior official to build on the strong foundation established today and yesterday, so that together we can ensure productive ministerial engagement at MC13 in Abu Dhabi. In the broader preparations for MC13, I'll be working closely with the Director General and the MC Chairperson, Minister of State for Foreign Trade of the United Arab Emirates, to ensure that substantive preparations are well coordinated and that ministers will have productive and meaningful engagement in Abu Dhabi. Let me end by stressing that delegations in Geneva have been putting a lot of effort to improve the daily functioning of WTO bodies through the so-called reform by doing process. We must commend the hard work of Geneva delegates and encourage them to continue to reform by doing together for the benefit of the membership. This was also echoed by senior officials during the closing session of the meeting, and I really did appreciate that. Thank you.
DG.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, GC Chair. And thanks to all of you for sticking around. I know it's really late. It was a long and fruitful set of meetings, and we ran over a little bit at the end. As I told the senior officials at the meeting, we're living in very uncertain times, and the world is looking at WTO and other multilateral institutions to show that we can contribute to solutions and bring a bit of certainty in a sea of uncertainty. I think with this meeting, which was one of the milestones on the GC Chair's path to MC13, we are on the right path to delivering some solutions at our 13th Ministerial Conference in Abu Dhabi next February. It was clear to me from the discussions that negotiators in Geneva have the political mandate now to try to achieve breakthroughs on issues from the dispute settlement reform of our dispute settlement system, agriculture and food security, the e-commerce work program, and of course, the second wave of the fisheries subsidies negotiations, as well as on development issues, among others. Now, this is not to say that the discussions on these issues, on any of these in the weeks and months ahead will be easy. But I do come out of this with a more positive feeling about our chances. There were many candid exchanges. There was building of trust among officials, which I think will be helpful when we need to make the very tough decisions. And I think delegations use the opportunity to have regional and bilateral meetings, which will help. And we did see some positive and concrete outcomes from the meeting. 8 WTO members deposited their instruments of acceptance of the Agreement on Fisheries Subsidies, bringing us closer to achieving the acceptance of this the coming into force of this historic agreement for ocean sustainability. We hope, and we have heard, that many more members are getting close to finalizing their instruments. And by the end of the year, we hope to see many more and then have the ratification and coming into force at MC13. I think the senior officials also reached an important milestone on the 23rd of October when they were present at a meeting chaired by the GC chair to gather in the effort to assist least developed countries on the path to graduation from LDC status by adopting a decision on the extension of support measures for graduating countries, duty-free, quota-free access during a period after they've graduated. I think all in all, it was a positive meeting. Dare I say that it lifted my spirits that we are on the right path to achieving the deliverables. It showed that officials, senior officials, are committed to doing the hard work ahead along with the negotiators, the ambassadors here in Geneva. So let me leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Thank you, Chair. We'll now open it up for questions in the room as well as online. So please raise your hand and let us know what organization you work for. So Laurent, first.
Yeah, thank you, Laurent Siro from the Swiss News Agency. DG, thank you for the press conference. Could you elaborate a little bit on the gaps that could be narrowed since Monday? Yesterday, you called for a clear political signal. Where tonight can you tell the different stakeholders that gaps were narrowed? And if you could elaborate on precisely on these topics. Thank you.
I think when you look at development issues, I think that first of all, the delivery of the list, the Annex 1 of the least developed countries request to have a transition period where they can still benefit from some of the things they were benefiting from when they were still least developed countries. The granting of that and the positive direction to complete the negotiation on Annex 2. I think that's one of the positive narrowings. And it was so positive that the senior officials were saying to the negotiators, the ambassadors, try to do this before MC13 so that we can take that off the table in terms of ministers themselves negotiating this and they can just bless it. So that was one. I think another one was with fishery subsidies. I saw, again, the narrowing of the gap on whether and when this should be completed. And there was a clear message to also that the political will, to complete this by the end of the year, if possible, for delivery of results at MC13. I also saw that as a part of the narrowing. Those are two very specific ones. I think there was also agreement, a lot of political will behind making progress with the DS reform. In other words, the present process that is ongoing on the DS reform was blessed. And the signal was continue, we bless the process, we want to see it come to fruition. So I think those three things are illustrative.
Thank you, Laurent. I have a question online from Emma Fash, Reuters. Emma?
Hi, good evening. I'm sorry I'm not there in person on this occasion.
1 second, Emma.
No problem.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm sorry I'm not there in person on this occasion. It's related to Laurent's question, but maybe you'd like to elaborate. Dr. Ngozi, which particular negotiations lifted your spirits the most in the last 2 days, and why? Where are you most hopeful? Thank you.
Emma, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, no problem. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay. Good evening. Sorry, I'm not there, Dr. Ngozi, on this occasion. I was wondering which area of the negotiations lifted your spirits the most over the last 2 days? What gives you the most ground for hope?
What?
I think that, Emma, thank you for the question. I'm sorry about the technical glitches. Look, in general, my spirit was lifted up by the positive attitude throughout the entire session. But I would say that two things: the clear signal to complete Fish 2 negotiations and the blessing of the process for the dispute settlement reform. Those two clearly lifted my spirits. Did she hear me?
Thank you, DG. Hannah, you had a question?
Hannah Monacan, Inside U.S. Trade. Thanks, Ismail. Thanks, DG and the General Counsel Chair. This is a question for both of you or either of you, whoever wants to answer. But did this meeting change anything about how you and the members intend to work between now and MC13? And relatedly, did this meeting add or subtract any issues from your list of expected MC13 outcomes?
Thank you for that question, because it is important. We had invited senior officials to this meeting so we could at least, subtract a few things as we look towards, unburden in a way, because you will recall that we have been saying that we would like to see ministers meeting and discussing high-level issues to make decisions rather than to negotiate. So for me, in my capacity as GC chair, it was quite heartening that we were able to gavel the decision on Annex 1 of the LDC graduation issue. It started that way and it set a very good tone. And I think that this is one of the things that definitely lifted my spirit. I'm encouraged, and I was particularly encouraged, as like the DG, by the outlook, the positive perspective that was adopted by most senior officials. They appreciated the work that ambassadors were doing in Geneva, and they reminded us something we already knew, that they would like ambassadors to do as much work as possible here before going to the ministerial. So even though we knew this already, in a way, it was very empowering to hear them say this, because you cannot do the work and sort of make sure that by the time you get to Abu Dhabi, you've done it if you are not empowered. So I think that empowerment by senior officials of the ambassadors was important. Their work was recognized. The reform by doing, what is happening across the WTO to the way the committees and councils work. This was blessed. We even had an applause for this. They said, carry on, you're doing a good job, and let's see more reforms by doing happening. So I think I'll just leave it at that to say, yes, I think those are some of the things that encouraged the process here in Geneva. Thank you.
Then accessions. There was a clear mention that we should complete the work on accessions so that the two acceding countries, the first two in 7 years, would also become a decision at the ministerial that the ministers can gavel rather than any negotiations going on. And that was also very encouraging.
Thank you, DG. I will take a question from Doug Palmer, Politico. Doug.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my question. Dr. Ngozi, I'd like to pick up on some of the comments that you made yesterday, I think in the General Council meeting, where you talked about how countries can't have the "it's my way" or the highway attitude, that people need to show flexibility in order to come together and have a successful ministerial. So in that regard, in the dispute settlement talks, do you think the U.S. is showing the necessary flexibility, or is it taking more of a my way or the highway stance? And then I would ask the question about other WTO members like the European Union. Are they showing flexibility, or are they taking a my way or the highway stance?
Thank you very much, Doug, for that question. I would like to say that I very much think the U.S. was not taking a my way or the highway stance. They've been quite, I think, collaborative is the word, in terms of trying to put their views across, definitely, but not saying it's my view or nothing. So I didn't see any delegation, to be honest. What is important in this process that is being run by the DPR for Guatemala is the extent to which, you know, everyone is collaborating. And I think we're all kind of surprised that this is happening, because we didn't always think it would happen that way. But I want to say that the collaboration is extensive, and we hope that it will continue as the DPR builds the negotiating text for this.
Thank you, DG. I will take Chris Horstman from Borderlex. Chris.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Ngozi, can I ask you about the substance of the proposals? You've mentioned that you've been encouraged by the positive tone, and you've been encouraged by the fact that the process has had the blessing of the senior officials. But is there any specific thing that you can point to which demonstrates that on the issues of substance, we are now closer to an agreement at MC13 than we were on Monday morning?
I think the biggest one I can say on substance is on the development issues. After the LDC issues, to be specific. After gaveling the Annex 1, as the GC chair said, it set a very positive tone. And I think on the substance of Annex 2, there is a bigger willingness to really try and negotiate this. And I did see that. So that was one. I think that I'm just trying to think of the others. Things still remain difficult in agriculture. And I think we have a lot of work to do there. There was the political will to make a breakthrough, but we still have differences in positions, and that will entail a lot of hard work. So on the other substance of the others, I think the fact that for fish, members agree that the text before them is a basis for the negotiation makes a big difference on substance, because, you know, sometimes members would say, look, I don't agree with even this text, but the Fish 2 text, all have agreed it's a basis for negotiation. And so far, what we have on DSS reform has also been blessed as a basis on which to proceed. So in terms of substance, I think we're getting somewhere. That does not mean that as the actual negotiations carry on, you will not see members going back and forth, but it's encouraging. We are not home free by any means, but it's encouraging.
Thank you, DG. I think we have time for one or two more questions, and I will go to John Zarokostas. John.
Yes, good evening, Director General. My question concerns the recent U.S. International Trade Commission report on the COVID-19 diagnostics and therapeutics. If you have some preliminary views on the findings, and if you think they will help jumpstart the negotiations in the WTO on extending the waiver for diagnostics and therapeutics, and if the chair of the General Council could chip in on this, that would be nice as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I think that this particular report, as if you look at it, tries to give a balanced picture or representation from all the stakeholders and leaves members to try to use it in the way they best see possible. So I think the members have to look at this. The truth is, it has not been discussed in the TRIPS Council. And so it's not possible yet to give you a sense of what members think of it. So I think we should wait until that comes up in the TRIPS Council. That's really the truth. I don't know if you want to chip in this.
Not on the report, but certainly on the issue, the fact that it did arise, it was raised during the meeting, the issue of, the IP issues and the fact that we have some homework to do from MC12, but in terms of the specifics of the report, I would associate myself with what you said, DG. It's something that needs to be discussed in the council, but it's a matter of concern to the members, and it was expressed during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. We'll take one last question and close. Peter Unpahon. Peter.
Good evening. Thank you for doing this. I'd like to follow up a little bit more on some specifics, and one of the issues that people have been interested in about MC13 is whether there will be some discussion on the deliberative function of the WTO, and particularly whether you can foresee, as a result of this week's meeting, that MC13 will include a discussion of industrial policy and industrial subsidies.
Thank you for the question. I think there was a general welcoming of the fact that we've started some discussions on the deliberative function of the WTO, and we did have a very robust discussion on trade and environment, trade and climate change, as well as trade and industrial policy. Now, whether we are going to include both those topics for MC13 is not clear yet. This is something that we'll have to decide. But I'm encouraged by the fact that we put it on the agenda of the SUM, and that gave us a feel. I think on trade and environment and climate, I tend to think that this might come up much more than anything else, but we're still to make that decision. So members will need to indicate what they want and, to be a member-driven choice. So we'll come back on that. But these were interesting sessions. We've not done that before. And so it was good to start the process. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. This will bring an end to our press conference today. I would like to thank the DG and the chair for joining us and giving us this readout of the senior officials meeting. And to thank our colleague in the room and online who joined us. Thank you and see you soon.
Thank you for your patience.